The Heat looks potentially deeper than they did last season, but which player is the best third option on the team? The answer might surprise you. Don Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your everyday podcast on the Miami Heat. Whether you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. I'm Wes Goldberg, editor at allyoucanheat.com, here with David Ramil. Both of us are credentialed Heat media members, and the best way to support the show is to leave a 5-star rating and review on your podcast app. Subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a comment. Who do you think who do you want to be the Heat's third best player next season? Not who do you think it will be or could be. Like, who would you, in a perfect world, want the Heat's third best player to be next season? Leave us a comment in the YouTube section. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. We're talking about who we think will be the Heat's third best player next season. We're going to go through the options and try to come to an agreement at the end of the show. But, David, we'll talk about Tyler Herro, Terry Rozier here in a second. But I want to start with our dark horse, Jaime Jaquez Jr. For him to be considered the Heat's third best player, again, feels like a long shot. But here's what I think he would have to do by the end of the year. So Jaime last year, 12 points per game on 49% shooting, 3.8 rebounds, 2.6 assists, and 1 steal per game. His per 36 numbers were basically 15, 5, and 3. So for Jaime, he would obviously have to improve on those numbers. I think he would have to take over. Oh, go ahead.
No, before we even get into Jaime's candidacy here, it's your question. This is the way that you wanted to frame it in terms of who's the best third option on this team. You make it sound like the top two options are pretty clear favorites. And I know the logistic answer is Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo in some order. I think that's still debatable.
Yeah.
But I don't know that those two were necessarily finished the season as the third best option. So what's your criteria for defining third best option? Because is it scoring? Because Tyler led the team in scoring last year. So what is it that you're using as the definitive?
It's not like a third scoring option. I just think third best player, just in a vacuum, who's Miami's third best player? So it's less to do with how the offense functions. I think Tyler Herro was the third best player last year. I think he's been Miami's third best player over the last couple of years. I think this is really the first time in a while where he could be pushed. Right? And I think if you ask anybody in the locker room, which we have, like everybody says it's Jimmy, it's Bam, and Tyler. Those are the three leaders on the team. Eric Spoelstra talks about it. Pat Riley talks about it. Those three guys talk about it. Those are the leaders of the team. I do wonder if there's a way where somebody like Terry Rozier or Jaime Jaquez Jr. push Tyler Herro out of that spot as Miami's third best player, right? And that's on both ends of the court. It's everything kind of. It's just if you were to make a ranking of all the top 100 players in the NBA. Who would be the third Miami Heat player on that list? I think it would be Jimmy and Bam would be the clear top two guys in that list in whatever order. That's not the point of today's debate.
But he could potentially leapfrog whoever this third best option is, whether it's Tyler, Terry, or Jaime. Could they potentially leapfrog Jimmy or Bam? What's the scenario then for them to be leapfrogged? What if not just injury, but
most improved player year of the award that unlike we have ever seen? I would be shocked if any one of these guys.
If Tyler averages 25 points per game, if Tyler averages 25 points per game and his defense is average, and his playmaking bumps up, his rebounding is already elite. Like, what else? I mean, is that enough to supplant? I guess we would have to kind of look at the. Right.
It would have to look like if Jimmy takes a step back in his age 35 season. If we assume that this Jimmy Butler year, which what do you say? What did Brian Windhorst say? He's going to be in kill mode or whatever. Like he's going to
something like that.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not just motivation and engagement that Jimmy Butler needs, maybe he's just aged into a new phase of his career and he takes a step back. I could see it, but right now I do think most people would have Jimmy Butler as one of the top 15 to 20 players in the NBA. It would just be it would be pretty dramatic for him to drop off in such a way, and for Tyler Herro to take such a, like you're just saying, like 25 points per game. That's 5 more points per game than he's averaged the last 3 years combined. That would be a huge leap. But that's
I
the kind of
get it.
leap it would take. That would be the kind of leap it would take. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I mean, I just kind of try and set some baseline kind of
No, it's good.
argument here because it's
Yeah.
it's difficult to kind of project that far ahead because I see. I mean, going through it. I'm not a math person. I mean, not even you. I know you're
It's blind
not.
leading the blind
But
here.
yes, yeah. But I was just looking at the different probabilities, and there's so many different options because you're looking at 5 players and how they can kind of just shake out. Like there's a world where Jaime could be the third best option, and let's say he can supplant either Bam or Jimmy if they wind up dropping off. Like what if it would be a crazy top 3 of like Bam, Tyler, Jaime, and Jimmy falls off, or Jimmy, Tyler, Jaime because Bam
Right.
off for some reason. There's a lot of different ways of looking at this exercise.
I would be shocked if those scenarios happened, but who
But
knows? I mean, we are just talking about, to be clear, this upcoming season. That's all we're talking about.
Yeah.
We're not projecting
Yeah.
forward. I also just wanted to include that in sort of our guidelines here. So I think, like I said, Jaime is probably the longest shot to supplant any of these guys. As great as he was as a rookie, he's still only going to be in his second season. That's how this works, right? And so maybe Jaime one day could be that player, but for him to do it this year would be pretty incredible. And I was just trying to think. I was kind of going through the thought exercise, like what would it take? What would he have to do to be considered Miami's third best player? I don't really see a world where he starts next to Jimmy
That's
Butler. I think that
No.
that's maybe the problem. I don't know that he has to be the starter, in order to be considered Miami's third best player, as long as he's basically their sixth man and
Yep.
he's closing games for them, right? You can kind of combine those things, and maybe he doesn't necessarily need to be a starter, although I would be up for argument on that.
The 6-man criteria has almost kind of been that player that gets more than just a handful of starts. Like, I don't remember exactly what it was when Tyler was 6-man, but you almost, because of injury or something like that, you
Sure,
almost
yeah.
invariably wind up starting 20 something games. So you kind of inflate your numbers a little bit because you did wind up starting. You're not just coming off the bench. But I think that's the possibility. Like, let's say Jimmy or Nico gets hurt and you wind up having to start somebody. Hey, option, but if you had to bring somebody off the bench, it might be Jaime. And again, boost these numbers up with, let's say 20, 25 quality starts over the course of the season.
Yeah.
And the rest of it kind of peppered in there is coming off the bench. That I think certainly helps his case significantly.
That's a great point, right? So I just looked it up while you were talking. Tyler Herro started 10 games the year he won Sixth Man of the Year.
Really?
10 of his
I would have
66.
played more.
He only
Wow.
played 66 games.
Oh, it was a short season. Yeah, that's right.
And it was a shorter year. But yeah, I mean, for Sixth Man of the Year, we're not talking about that necessarily, but you only have to come off the bench in at least more than 50% of your games. So a majority of your games you come off the bench. But yeah, I think Jaime taking over a 6-man, and not just as sort of the guy getting the most minutes off the bench either. I'm talking about taking over the second unit the way that Tyler Herro did when he won Sixth Man of the Year. Being a better facilitator, like we saw a little bit with him experimenting in Summer League, and it's something that he's working on. I think he's got to get better defensively also, just be more consistent
Yes.
defensively,
Yes.
two-way kind of player, be a playmaker, I think, on defense. He averaged 1 steal per game last year. Can he bump that up to 1.5 steals per game and a bunch of sort of those pick six type of plays? Can he kind of decorate his highlight reel with a bunch of those? And then, yeah, Tyler Herro averaged 20 points per game when he won Sixth Man of the Year. I think Jaime Jaquez would have to average 18 to 20 points per game with the defense and the two-way play that he provides, the size, the playmaking, the facilitating, all that stuff. If he were to put that whole package together this year, it would be really incredible. I think that would be maybe a couple of years before we're anticipating that kind of leap to happen. But that's what it would take to answer this question in terms of Jaime being Miami's third best player by the end of the season.
Yeah, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, just consistent scoring, better defense, better overall, I think, just playmaking, but they'd have to feel impactful. Like that's the thing.
Yes.
It's like, Tyler, for all the grief he's been given over the last couple of seasons, there were a lot of moments during that year when he was 6-man, when the offense was basically hope Tyler gets his shot. And he was able to do so more often than not. And that's why he was so impactful. Like those minutes, even clutch situations in games and things like that. I mean, that's been going on since his rookie year, certainly. But a lot of those minutes were just, Tyler coming in there, making an impact. And you kind of have to get that same sense from Jaime. And I think we kind of got a taste from that last year, which I think strengthens his candidacy looking forward to the season. Because, I mean, when he was out there, there were moments where he was he was winning games. And if I
Yeah.
recall correctly, I think there was even a win that might have been almost solely attributed to the kind of impact he had late in the game.
Yeah,
I can't
Christmas
recall
Day.
exactly.
I mean,
Was
Christmas
it?
Day
Oh,
against the
yeah.
76ers. It was
Right.
all Jaime Jaquez. And I think
Right.
that's such a good point you make with the impact and just the imprint when you put your fingerprints all over a basketball game. And that's the
Right.
thing Jaime Jaquez kind of already does. Like
Right.
it's not every single game. It's sprinkled in throughout the rookie season, but it was sprinkled in throughout his rookie season. That's amazing for
Yeah.
a rookie to have that kind of impact. And we've talked about Eric
Yeah.
Spoelstra giving him the ball to make key decisions down the stretch in the fourth quarter of that Pistons game, second or third game of the season for the Heat or whatever it was. Like them giving the ball to Jaime to swing it to Duncan Robinson for the three-pointer that they needed to kind of stave off a Pistons run. Like I think Eric Spoelstra has continued to give Jaime more and more responsibility, which is why it's the longest shot of the three people we're talking about. But I don't think it's impossible. I really don't. It would take these enormous leaps from him, but it's not. It's a non-0% chance. In other words, is where I think the Jaime Jaquez case is. That said, for Jaime to be Miami's third best player, would that mean a worse than expected season for Tyler Herro? And would that even be a bad thing? Like and subscribe. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Your schedule's packed. You got kids' activities. You've got these things going on at work. So much more. It's easy to let your priorities slip every once in a while. But when something makes you happy and it's hard to make time for it, that's when you actually have to try your hardest to try and squeeze it in there. We feel we know what it's like to have no time for yourself, and there are non-negotiables sometimes, like therapy, that might be more important than ever. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, well, guess what? You should probably give BetterHelp a try because it's really convenient. It's entirely online, designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. You just fill out a brief questionnaire. It takes no more than a couple of minutes, and you get matched with a licensed therapist almost immediately. And you can switch therapists at no additional charge anytime you want. Let's say your schedule changes, or for whatever your reason might be, you can go ahead and make that switch and you'll be matched up with a new therapist almost immediately. So never skip therapy day, especially with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today, and you get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On NBA podcast. There's no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed or entertained as Locked On NBA, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If Jaime ended up as the Heat's third best player, it's hard to envision that happening without Tyler Herro taking a pretty big step back. And that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing, right? I think one of the things we talk about with Tyler Herro is that maybe he's not used the right way. He might be more of a high usage player than he ought to be in Miami's offense. You talked about even when he was sixth man coming off the bench. I mean, those units were all Tyler Herro, and that was fine when he was sixth man, but it's fair to say that the chemistry hasn't exactly panned out in terms of Tyler Herro with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo in that starting lineup. And I do think part of this is just Jimmy Butler. His laissez-faire approach to the regular season in the last couple of years has sort of thrust Tyler Herro into that higher usage role, as well as Bam Adebayo. But this is where I kind of get on the sort of the polar kind of approach here. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing if Tyler Herro takes a step back? Because you could argue it would be a good thing if he takes a step back, because that means Jimmy Butler is more motivated and engaged in the regular season, and Tyler Herro is kind of dialing his game more in that efficient Klay Thompson level direction, where he's a little bit more of a catch and shoot guy and not dancing with the ball and not being asked to be a playmaker as much, just doing the thing that he's elite at as opposed to the things that he's good at. And even that small difference could be a big difference in terms of his efficiency. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get that. I just don't know exactly. The discourse on Tyler has become so loud and distorted. I just don't know what would appease the masses in terms of what they'd want from Tyler. Is it just efficiency? Kind of like what we saw maybe from Duncan last year, where he was not, again, a gaudy producer or anything like that. He had his big moments and stuff, but is he, he was just more impactful and was able to change his game up with his drives to the rim and things of that sort to kind of switch up what he had seen from him, kind of establish himself a little bit more as a playmaker too. With Tyler, that wouldn't be enough. Like even just tweaking it to the point where he'd be more efficient, would that be something that fans would appreciate more and say, oh, he's stepping up in a third role or even a fourth role, but at least he's being more effective in those moments because now he has this reduced workload and he can just be more effective in that regard.
Right.
I don't know.
As
It's
opposed
a tough
to
question.
as opposed to becoming
Yeah.
that number one option that so
Yeah.
many people
Yeah.
hoped and thought and maybe predicted that he would be. I look, if if Tyler Herro comes out and is scoring 20 points per game, but is shooting 50% from 3-point range, and his shooting percentage is up closer to that as opposed to where it is for his career around 44%, if he's closer to 48% shooting overall, and he's just like
Yes.
this efficient wizard shooter guy,
Yeah.
nobody's
That'd be
going to
ideal.
dislike that. Nobody's
No.
going to dislike that, right? It might come short of expectations that people have had about Tyler Herro, but at this stage,
Yeah.
if the guy just comes out and he's the best 3-point shooter in the NBA, who's going to be upset with that? You know, especially with
No.
this offense that so desperately needs the 3-point shooting. I mean, but the thing with Tyler Herro, he's also in pole position. He is the incumbent in terms of being Miami's third best player. For him to remain Miami's third best player, he might just have to do what he's been doing, which, like, to your point, fans might not appreciate that. Fans might not want that. They might want him to take that step up or to the side or different or even back or whatever.
Right.
But if he just does what he's been doing, and Jaime Jaquez Jr. doesn't take this huge leap that we just talked about, which again would be a long shot for that leap to happen this year, he's still Miami's third best player. Like, I think it would take quite a bit to knock him off this spot.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, he's been that for a number of seasons. I mean, I'm trying to think back when he wasn't Miami's third best player. I guess it
You
was
could
his second
argue-
year.
Yeah, maybe his
Right?
his first or second year when Goran Dragic was on the team.
Yeah. Because then Goran went for Kyle Lowry, and even maybe by that last season he was with the team. No, I'd still say it was Goran, although you kind of
Yes.
saw Tyler creeping up as a very close fourth option for this team. But yeah, I think that's basically it. Tyler, I mean, he's my pick. I think as of now, going into this episode, although I'm kind of fluctuating a little bit here. I think it'd be him to just kind of hold that spot and continue to balance production with efficiency, which I think is the goal here for him, is to just be a little bit more effective, be a little bit better than he was, and still be able to put up biggish games. Not big games, because again, nobody in Miami's offense is ever going to flirt with that 40 or 50-point outing. That's just not realistic, unfortunately. But I think, well, aside from Jimmy Butler in certain playoff moments, but those are so few and far between. I can't look at those and use them as a consistent thing that we'll see from Jimmy moving forward. For Tyler, I think it's just going to be, he's going to have a couple games where he's going over 30, and he's going to have a couple games where, as long as it's an 18, let's say it's an 18-8 and 6 kind of night, good solid outing, but it's on 9 of 14 shooting, 5 of 7 from 3-point range. Like, you look at that and that's really good, solid production, efficient, effective. It comes in a win. And I think that's another thing too. It's not just the offense. Like, we're talking and almost focused exclusively on that, but like, there have to be leaps, like we said with Jaime. There has to be improvement from him as a defensive player as well, because I
thought we saw it last year too. Before he got hurt, before the leg injury.
Yes.
As a one-on-one defender, he's never going to be good. But that's not all of defense, right? There's team defense, there's awareness, there's knowing where to be, there's being a playmaker, and I think Tyler Herro, he has said as much. He understands he's always going to be a weak link on defense in one-on-one situations, but he can make up for that with getting steals and creating those pick six plays in the open court, which we saw. I mean, he had a game-winning steal.
Yes.
What was it? I forget what the game was. Somebody here, was it a Milwaukee game or something, where he had a game-winning steal at the end of a game, and we got on the podcast and had kind of this aha moment with him. Like, this is how he can impact games defensively. And he kind of rates better defensively if you look at the metrics, because he's a good rebounder, but that ain't nothing.
Yes.
Right? Getting that defensive rebound ends that defensive possession. It's a big part of the possession. He's good at that. He's an elite rebounder for his position. So all of that is there. For him to not, basically, I'm at the point where there's 3 scenarios where Tyler Herro isn't the Heat's third best player this season. it would be that dramatic leap from Jaime, or a
Right.
dramatic, or maybe a better than expected season from Terry Rozier, who we'll talk about him here in a second. Him getting hurt and just not being available, that's an option for
Sure.
anybody, right? Or he gets traded before February, and then he's not on the roster by the end of the season. And those would be the three scenarios in which Tyler Hero wouldn't end the season as Miami's third best player.
I think I don't think you can even entertain that last option of him being traded unless he's Miami's first or second best player. Like he'd have to show such a leap over the next few months, and if that's the case, that kind of negates your willingness to trade him too. Because again, I mean, the option to trade him probably existed this offseason, but you weren't going to get anything of commensurate value. And that being the case, why not just go ahead and keep your 24-year-old scoring guard and see what you can do, see if he can continue to take that leap and and improve his overall game.
All fair points. Tyler Hero, he's the guy that has to get knocked off here. But how close is Terry Rozier to overtaking Hero as the Heat's third best player? Like and subscribe. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime filters out the fluff so that you get only the incredible deals that you're looking for on great seats to any event you might be thinking about, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. You don't have to worry about that. You get your best price guarantee right away. Gametime makes it also easy whether you're looking for concerts, Major League Baseball games, comedy shows, theater, whatever you're looking for. You'll find it on Gametime, and there are so many different features that make it so easy to get the tickets that you're looking for. They've got their lowest price guarantee. Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference if you can find a seat that's lower anywhere. Seat views, a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. And again, if you wait sometimes till the last minute to get tickets for a Major League Baseball game right after first pitch is thrown, that ticket prices go immediately lower. You can save a lot of money that way. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets or any tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You get $20 off your first purchase. Terms will apply, but again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, and you get $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. We'll be right back.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, like the video. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. All right, so you could make the case that Terry Rozier is already the Heat's third best player. I don't think I would, based on last season's sample size alone that he had with Miami. But it wouldn't be out of left field for that to happen this season. And if somebody wanted to come to me with a really strong Terry Rozier argument, I would listen. I wouldn't debate it that hard. I think if you polled most NBA observers, they would still have Tyler Hero ranked higher than Terry Rozier, kind of on that top 100 list that I was referencing earlier, but not by a lot. What do you think?
It's close. I mean, Terry had a pretty solid start to the year in Charlotte, and I think that he certainly showed that he could put up a lot of points, albeit on a bad team that wasn't really winning a lot of games. I don't know how the general field kind of views him versus Terry Rozier. I think you've got two guards that are limited in different ways, and one's maybe towards the peak tail end of his career, another one's entering his peak, and he's still kind of young. It's different, and how you evaluate these players is based on like your personal preferences of a young player or a more established veteran, things of that sort. So judging them in a vacuum would be almost impossible. But in terms of their overall production in Miami last season, I think if you take a similar sample size from Terry and Tyler, I think Tyler still gets the nod, but you'd have to give, like, Terry was taking some tough shots and he really stepped up in some games. I kind of like his chances of being Miami's third best player too. Like, I wouldn't necessarily prefer that because, again, I think in order for Miami to play their best, Tyler has to be a much more engaged and efficient version of himself, and that usually leads to better production from him, if that's the case that we're seeing. But if Terry winds up stepping up and going, you know what, this is my team now. Not my team as like being the leader, but certainly much more comfortable than what we saw from him last year. I mean, everybody kind of forgets the growing pains.
He was starting to get comfortable. Yes. Then he had the neck injury and all these things. Like, I'm with you. It would not be like, this is between Jaime and Terry Rozier. If you made me bet $5, I would bet $5 on Terry Rozier being like unseating Tyler Hero as Miami's third best player. he has to be more efficient. He shot 42% basically for his career. He needs to be closer to 46%, which I think he can do. He was at 46% shooting overall. To your point earlier, like when he had a really strong start to the season with Charlotte, it wasn't just a lot of points on a bad team. It was among the most efficient offensive kind of stretches he's had for his career. But he's hovered around 42% shooting for his career. He has not been an efficient scorer by really any stretch throughout his career. So, like, as inefficient as people think Tyler Herro is, I mean, that guy's at
Terry's right there.
45% career field goal percentage. Terry Rozier is at 42%. My main thing with Terry Rozier, the scoring is what it's going to be, right? I think he can apply rim pressure. I think when you're talking about impact and how loud is his impact and all these things, I think Terry Rozier made it a loud impact for a long stretch before he got knocked out with the neck injury last year for Miami. Even if the efficiency numbers weren't always there, I think his drive and kick game was really important. And he was starting to develop a chemistry with Bam Adebayo that seemed really important. And by the way, if he can tether his minutes to Bam, that's a really good way to kind of get yourself into the most important, meaningful moments of every game and become Miami's third most important player there. But my other part other than the scoring, he does need to average probably 18 to 20 points per game. That's sort of by default to be the third best player, right? But can he lead Miami in assists? I think it's a fair question. 4.6 assists per game last year for Miami, was second behind Jimmy Butler, who averaged 5. I think Terry Rozier leading the offense in assists is very much in the realm of possibility, depending on what kind of version of Jimmy Butler we get. We've talked enough about that. But Rozier was already second in per game assists. I think he could lead Miami in assists, and if he does, that's a big feather in his cap for kind of getting this title here.
Yeah, it all depends on how the offense plays. Again, with the projected starting lineup, which is the starting lineup that they used last year, and everybody was healthy-ish following the position of Rozier. It's going to be Rozier, Herro. It's going to be Jimmy Jovic, and it's going to be Bam Adebayo at center for now. Like, that's always capable of changing. Who knows? Somebody gets hurt, and you're going to have to tweak it somehow. But let's say that's the starting five, and Rozier is your de facto point guard. Will they make the switch to kind of let him, quote unquote, run the offense to some degree, and then have Jimmy play a little bit off ball, have Tyler play off ball? I think that's how it winds up playing out. And if that's the case, then you're going to have Rozier kind of having to find that balance as a playmaker / scorer, but also be more effective. I mean, you're kind of asking him to do the same things that you're asking Tyler to do, just be more effective, kind of balance that playmaking and scoring role, and to also improve defensively. Because I think I would say in a vacuum, Rozier is probably a better defender, but he's also somewhat undersized, and so that's always going to be a challenge for him, especially in Miami's switch-heavy defense. So it's a tough conundrum here, because there's so many different ways it all plays out.
Yeah, and to your point too, does Terry Rozier and Tyler Herro remain Miami's starting lineup? Is that what they end up going with, right? Eric Spoelstra might just make this decision in terms of who Miami's third best player is after training camp, right? He might just say, you know what, we're making Terry Rozier the third most important player, and by virtue of that, our third best player, just to start the season, we're bringing Tyler Herro off the bench, or vice versa. You could say, you know what, Tyler Herro, you just got to get better at running the offense. Jimmy Butler, we're going to make you run the offense more. We're sending Terry Rozier to the bench. You're not going to have that Terry Rozier safety blanket in that starting lineup, maybe. I don't know. I would be surprised, but
yes,
it's certainly an option. To me, the way that this looks like for Terry Rozier is, can he be Miami's sort of Derek White? So for that starting group, that backcourt of Rozier and Tyler Herro to be viable, one of them has to be better than they were defensively last year. And the bet would be on Terry Rozier being that player, because he was a defensive-oriented guard earlier in his career before he became this bulk volume scorer in Charlotte. Can he take that step defensively, average 5 or 6 assists per game, get that efficiency up, and just sort of be this everything glue guy? And I know you don't usually associate that kind of player as being a third best player on a playoff team, but in today's NBA, you very much do. You have a very strong argument to make that Derek White was Boston's third best player last year, right? Like, you can make that argument. And so can Terry Rozier kind of be that?
Who was Boston's third best player?
I would have had Derek White. I would have. I mean, it was between him, Porzingis. I guess you could have argued Drew Holiday. I don't think a lot of people would have. But those were the guys, right? And if you consider Porzingis' availability, then you got Derek White there. Yeah.
pretty even though amongst those candidates. So yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. I don't know. I think Rozier, but that only works because I think Derek White's role is almost so specialized, and again, you have to have.
Well, you've got
Two
Tatum running your
superstars.
offense. You've got Brown.
That's what
Exactly,
it
to your
is.
point. So and there's so many things that are here. All right, let's put an end to this. Jaime Jaquez Jr., Tyler Herro, Terry Rozier. Who do you think will be Miami's third best player next year?
I think, I think it's Tyler Herro, but I could
Yeah.
see a case where it might be Jimmy Butler.
I love the swerve. I love the swerve. That's like a whole other episode. Is Jimmy Butler actually the Heat's third best player? Gonna love what the comments do to you. Usually I'm the Jimmy Butler hater, so that'll
No,
be fun.
it's not hate. It's not hate. It's just
I know it's not.
I think he's gonna take a step back in some regards to allow them to thrive in the regular season, and I think he's gonna.
I just
have
don't
his
see
moments.
it when Jimmy Butler's going for a contract. I don't think it'll be if he takes a step back. It won't be willing.
Okay.
It won't be a willing one.
No, but yeah, you're right. But at the same time, I mean, you can go as hard as you want to for that contract, but at 35, at some point, you have to go. Whoa, you can't go as hard as you used to. So
that's the thing.
I think that might be a harsh reality.
It's a little bit different, right? It would be a little bit less willingness and might be more age related. I'm going Tyler Herro. He's the incumbent. I do think that there's another level for him to get to. I've been on this. I come off as like the Tyler Herro apologist all the time, but I'm also the guy that says he'll never be the number one option. So stop expecting it of him. I probably have the lowest ceiling associated with Tyler Herro than most Heat fans do. I don't know, but I still think that he's a very good scorer. I think he's talking about all the right things. We didn't get a chance to plug it earlier, but his interview for Forbes with our friend Matt Issa over there, talking about how he wants to be more efficient. I just think he's saying all the right things. And you even go back to what he would tell us in the locker room last year about wanting to be more of a catch and shoot guy in those things. I do think those things help his case. I don't think they hurt his case, right? I think they help his case in kind of cementing his spot.
But is it just talk, though? I mean, maybe that's tomorrow's episode, but it's just,
I don't know.
it feels like we've been here.
We started to see it a little bit. We start to see it a little bit before everybody around him got hurt, and then he had to be the offense against the Celtics. When everybody was, when people are healthy, he can be that. All right, that'll do it for us today. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Like, comment, and subscribe on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app.